They laughed. From the gilded halls of their new empire, they looked across the ocean and they laughed. It was a sound of contempt, of arrogant certainty, a chilling laughter that dismissed an entire nation as a sleeping, decadent giant, incapable of waking. They heard the words of a president, a promise made to a world trembling in the shadow of their conquest, and they treated it as the fantasy of a fool. The promise was a number, a figure so audacious, so beyond the realm of possibility, that it could only be a bluff. 50,000 airplanes a year, the masters of the most fearsome war machine the world had ever seen. This was not a threat. It was a joke. This is the story of how that laughter died in their throats, choked by a storm of steel and aluminum forged in the heart of a nation they so profoundly misunderstood. It is a testament to the idea that the true strength of a people is not found in their boasts, but in the quiet, determined hum of their workshops and the unyielding spirit of their hands. In 1939, as darkness fell over Europe, the United States was a nation at peace. Its industrial might focused on cars, refrigerators, and the comforts of modern life. Its military aircraft production was a mere trickle, just over 3,600 planes for the entire year. So when President Franklin Sterling stood before his people and the world, calling for an arsenal of democracy that could produce 50,000 aircraft annually, the enemy's top military strategist, the bombastic Field Marshal Erich von Falkenrath, openly scoffed. The Americans are masters of the refrigerator and the razor blade, he sneered to his inner circle. They are a nation of salesmen, not engineers. They cannot do it. His words echoed the fatal flaw of his entire regime, a blindness born of ideological prejudice, an inability to see past his own twisted view of the world. He saw a nation of individuals, a chaotic mix of races and cultures, and he mistook its diversity for division, its freedom for weakness. He could not comprehend the power that could be unleashed when such a nation united for a common cause. The call went out, and the nation answered. But how do you transform a country that builds family sedans into one that builds long-range bombers? The task seemed insurmountable. Aircraft were not cars. They were complex, handcrafted machines, built by artisans, not assembly lines. The challenge fell to a man who understood the rhythm of mass production better than almost anyone alive. Walter Kane, the former president of a great automotive corporation. Kane was a quiet, pragmatic genius who saw symphonies in steel and poetry in motion. He didn't see the complexity of a bomber as an obstacle. He saw it as a problem of engineering, a puzzle to be solved. He brought the soul of the automotive industry's obsession with efficiency, standardization, and the relentless logic of the moving assembly line and began the monumental task of applying it to the sky. He and his team of dollar-ear men, executives who left their lucrative private sector jobs to serve their country, became the generals of a new kind of army, an army of riveters, welders, and engineers. The transformation was breathtaking. Across the country, factories were retooled, and vast new ones rose from empty fields with astonishing speed. The numbers began to tell a story that defied belief, a story that von Falkenrath and his masters refused to read. From that meager 3,611 planes in 1939, production exploded. By 1942, the United States produced over 47,000 aircraft, nearly meeting the impossible goal. But that was only the beginning. The industrial giant was just waking up, just stretching its muscles. By 1944, at the peak of its power, American factories were turning out nearly 100,000 military aircraft a year. The initial goal of 50,000, once the subject of worldwide ridicule, had been doubled. In that single year, America produced more aircraft than the entire wartime output of Nazi Germany. The trickle had become a flood. The whisper had become a deafening roar that could be heard across the Atlantic. Nowhere was this miracle more evident than at a sprawling new factory in the American heartland, a plant nicknamed Liberty Creek. It was the largest factory under one roof in the world. A mile-long behemoth built for a single purpose, to mass-produce the B-2 for Liberator, a heavy bomber that would become the workhorse of the Allied air campaign. At first, the project was a nightmare. The complexity of the aircraft overwhelmed the new systems, and production faltered. Workers, unaccustomed to the tight tolerances of aviation, made mistakes. Cynics began calling the plant Struggle Creek, but they, like the enemy overseas, underestimated the power of American ingenuity and resolve. Walter Kane and his team ironed out the kinks, simplified the processes, and empowered the workforce. Soon, the great factory found its rhythm. The assembly line, a moving river of aluminum, began to flow, and by April of 1944, the flow became a torrent. At its peak, Liberty Creek was completing a fully finished, battle-ready B-2 for Liberator bomber every 63 minutes. One single factory was outproducing the entire German aviation industry. The joke was no longer funny. The source of the enemy's blindness was not a lack of intelligence. Their spies sent back accurate reports detailing the scale of the American mobilization. But the high command, blinded by the poison of their own ideology, simply refused to believe it. How could a nation they viewed as racially impure, a mongrel society run by decadent capitalists, achieve such a feat? Their worldview told them that only their master race was capable of such discipline and industrial achievement. They could not conceive that a free and diverse people could outproduce their rigidly controlled totalitarian state. And who were the people who shattered this prejudice? They were the true architects of victory. They were women who poured out of their homes and into the factories, making up 65% of the aircraft industry workforce by 1943. They were the riveters, proving with every perfectly placed rivet that they were the equal of any man. They were African Americans, migrating from the rural South to the industrial North, seeking opportunity and a chance to fight for a freedom they themselves did not fully enjoy at home. They were farmers, teenagers fresh out of high school, immigrants, and elderly men who came out of retirement. They were a microcosm of America itself, diverse, sometimes fractious, but ultimately united force. They worked around the clock, fueled by coffee, patriotism, and the knowledge that every plane they built was a message of hope to the world and a nail in the coffin of tyranny. Their productivity, their skill, and their dedication were a direct refutation of the enemy's hateful ideology. This industrial might was not a sideshow to the war. It was the decisive factor. It was the reason the Allies could achieve and maintain air supremacy. The thousands upon thousands of fighters and bombers that streamed from American factories made the D-Day landings possible, providing a protective umbrella over the beaches of Normandy. They enabled the relentless, sustained bombing campaigns that systematically dismantled Germany's own industrial capacity, grinding its war machine to a halt. Every rivet hammered in Detroit was a blow against tyranny in Berlin. Every engine tested in California was a promise of liberation for Paris. The war was won by the courage of soldiers, sailors, and airmen. But their courage would have been in vain without the tools of victory forged by the hands of ordinary people back home. In the end, even the arrogant Field Marshal Erich von Falkenrath was forced to see the truth. In the ashes of his fallen empire, facing his accusers, the man who had laughed at the American president's promise offered a stark and bitter confession. He admitted that the sheer, overwhelming weight of American production had crushed them. "We were not defeated by their generals," he lamented, his voice stripped of its former bluster. "We were defeated by their factories. That endless, unstoppable flood of material. Okay, it broke our backs." The laughter had finally and forever died. The story of this production miracle is more than just a chapter in a history book. It was the moment that ushered in the American century. It was a powerful, undeniable demonstration of the superiority of a democratic and free market system over a totalitarian one, created a wave of post-war prosperity, fueled by the new technologies and manufacturing methods developed in the crucible of war. It proved that a nation's greatest resource is the untapped potential of its people, all of its people, when they are united in a common purpose. It is a timeless reminder that when faced with an existential threat, a free people can achieve the impossible. It teaches us that the loudest boasts often come from the most fragile foundations, and that true, lasting power is built not with words of hate, but with the quiet, collective, and determined work of many hands, building a better, freer world, one rivet at a time.